Hello, everybody. Welcome to Big Blue Book Club. And this is our 10th installment, and we are excited to have real people in the room. Usually we do this with just Zoom, but we have real people in the room. And so I want to welcome you all. I'm Mindy McCulley. I'm Extension Specialist for Instructional Support with University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension, Family and Consumer Science. It's this awful title. And this is my partner in crime. I have to get up here. Sorry. This is Dr. Amy Kostelic. She is our extension professor for adult development and aging, also with University of Kentucky. So we are, she's my partner in crime as we travel the state because she's the travel expert. I'm the book club expert, obviously not the Zoom expert today. So we're gonna make this work. We are excited because this is different. So my old Kentucky road trip inspired us to take a road trip, right?
Yeah, really. We were inspired. So we were at a meeting for work at for Cooperative Extension, and yeah, it was. And Blair was talking about our book. You were our keynote speaker, and there were a couple of us sitting at a table just like y'all are, and we thought, we got to do it. We got to do this. We got to take a road trip through Kentucky. And it's special because with Cooperative Extension, we've got some of our agents here. We've got a presence in every single county. And we thought, what not a better way to highlight what we're doing in our counties through extension, as well as how awesome our state is, and to really try to motivate people who are interested in book clubs. So we were talking earlier at a meeting and about just different interests in book clubs and what that looks like. And sometimes people will have excuses where I don't have time to read, or I don't want to read, or, whatever it may be, or I don't want to participate in a book club. But we were hoping that this might give people the push or the bug to say, I want to get out and see the state and read at the same time. So I think it's a unique opportunity to do that. So we really are excited to be here with y'all today and kick it off here in Frankfort.
So I am not going to talk much longer right now. I'm going to turn it over to Blair Hess and Cameron Ludwick, who are our book's authors. And they are going to just share a little bit about the book and about why they wrote it and all that good stuff. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So Blair and Cameron, come right up. So you all want to hear, or do you want?
Yeah, we'll wander. I think there's an extra. See if you're on.
I'm on, I think.
Hello, everybody. I'm Cameron Ludwick and
Blair.
and this is Blair Hess, authors of My Old Kentucky Road Trip. And I have to tell you, we really were tickled to be the selection for the Big Blue Book Club. This is, I think, a first for us. I'm not sure that
I don't think we've ever been a book club. I've been in a book club.
To our knowledge, yeah.
To our knowledge. I mean, maybe they're reading it and we just don't know. You also sounded just like your mother when you said tickled.
Oh,
I just
no.
want you to know this.
Oh, no. I'm very glad this link isn't
on the right side. I'm going to tell her use tickled. No, we're so excited. It's really funny. My daughter, she's in 3rd grade, and this year they have something called a 30 book challenge where they're supposed to read 30 books from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And she is stressed to the max. And I said, just consider this your very first book club that you're ever going to be in. And I promise you'll be in more and you'll love them all. I don't think she is as excited as I am.
She doesn't believe you yet?
No, she does not believe me yet. I said, it's always fun though when you're reading together. So we're reading the 30 books together. And I politely suggested she use one of our books in the book as one of her 30 books because it says fiction, nonfiction, anything. And she declined. So this really is our first book club.
Amazing. Well, even though this is a first for us, we couldn't be more thrilled to be here. And this has truly been, pun absolutely intended, a long journey. Blair and I have really known each other for more than 20 years.
I know Tuesday night we did an event and I told everyone we'd been friends for 20 years. And then I was counting and realizing it was a lot longer than that. But I say 20 years, I think, because I like to consider myself
We're
still
only
30.
25.
And so I'm like, oh, if I'm this young, we must know each other for 20 years. But I think it's probably closer to
Ruh-roh.
30.
That's okay. But really, my old Kentucky road trip started as a blog. And it started back in 2009. We had both graduated from the University of Kentucky. Go Cats. And Blair had moved away. I was still in Lexington working. And we just were looking for reasons to get together and hang out again. We were friends all through college, and what are you doing on your weekends? And she's moved away, and let's find something fun to do. And what's in the middle? What's between Nashville and Lexington? And come to find out, I mentioned casually, I actually always missed the school trip or the Girl Scout trip to Mammoth Cave. Let's do Mammoth Cave. I couldn't believe it.
Neither could I. And I still make fun of her on a consistent basis for being the only Kentuckian who had never been to Mammoth Cave. So we decided to meet halfway in Cave City, Kentucky, and we were going to make a whole weekend out of it. So we did not set out to take a Kentucky road trip or a my old Kentucky road trip or any of the sort. We just set out to meet in the middle. We went to Mammoth Cave. We slept in wigwams. If anyone has not been to Wigwam Village number 2 in Cave City, I strongly suggest it. We did our Mammoth Cave tour. We did Dino World. We actually missed our Mammoth Cave tour because on the way to Mammoth Cave, we passed a sign on the side of the road that said cheap moccasins. And we were like,
yes, please.
Interested. We're interested.
You've got me.
So we stopped and, of course, met the man who owned Leroy's old general store and talked to Leroy for such a considerable amount of time. We had to reschedule our cave tour, but it was fine. It turned out great. Went to Dino World. But as we were there, we were jotting down notes about our travels. We were like, oh, definitely Wigwam Village number 2. Mattresses are okay. Showers maybe hold off till you get home. When you go to the Mammoth Cave, we like this tour.
I'm type A enough that I'm taking notes anywhere, anytime, anyway.
So as we realized we were doing that, we didn't really know we were making travel notes, but that's what we were doing. And so after that weekend, it was a month or so later, and we thought, well, let's do something again. And so we found ourselves right outside of Louisville at Waverly Hills Sanatorium, the old tuberculosis hospital. And that was a totally different experience. I still have scars on my arm.
I was clinging to Blair the whole time. These tours, by the way, don't start till 10 p.m. until it's well and truly dark. And this place is so haunted.
And
I guarantee it.
4 hours long. So I dragged her through Waverly Hills for 4 hours in the middle of the night. But it was a whole different experience, right? And we were making notes about that. And it took us a couple of these before we realized, we have advice for people. We have thoughts and notes and we want to share it. And at that time, how do you share it? You either make a YouTube video, which we learned
we're not good at.
Very early, we were not going to do
We're
that.
not good at it.
Or you blog about it. And so we started a blog. It was, my old
great 2009 heyday of web blogging.
I think it was like my old Kentucky road trip.wordpress.com or something very similar. And we started writing our thoughts down, and they were not great thoughts. They weren't organized. They definitely weren't literary. They were just words in blog form where we wanted to tell you where to go, how to travel, how to not make the mistakes we were making, like showing up 20 minutes before the gates closed at the Abraham Lincoln historic site. All of the things we learned, we wanted to tell you about. And so we were jotting them down in a blog, and we were taking photos on like a little
point and shoot digital camera,
and posting them. Like I said, it was rough around the edges, definitely.
And I guess we really thought we were going to be internet famous at a certain point before internet famous was a thing.
We were going to be influencers before influencers.
And it was very much before Kentucky Kicks Ass and, Team Kentucky and all of the big ways now that I think we all express pride in our state. And for us, we had always been proud. And I think really when we got down to it, it was whenever we went on vacations, you always went on a vacation elsewhere. It was going to visit the family in Michigan. It was going down to Florida to the beach. It was going out to California for whatever. And all of a sudden we realized like, oh no, there are some amazing trips just here. And I've lived here for 21, 22 years at this point, and I have not seen these things. I've not been to Mammoth Cave. I've not checked out Waverly Hills Sanatorium. I didn't even know it existed until we discovered it and decided to go.
Embarrassment. You're an
A
embarrassment.
total embarrassment.
Embarrassment to Kentucky.
And we don't want anybody else to feel that embarrassment. And I know we are both super proud Kentuckians, and I think there's not really a Kentuckian anywhere who's either come here or been born here who's not proud to be a Kentuckian. So for us, that became one of the most important ways that we showed love and pride for our state and wanted to make sure we were getting that out to everyone else.
So we blogged for a bit and we weren't paying a lot of attention, right? We had maybe, I don't know, 18, 19 road trips under our belt. We were still enjoying it, casually posting. And one day I logged on to this, or I was going to the site and I wanted to show someone something, and the site was down. And we are also not webmasters. So far we have established we were not writers, we were not photographers, videographers, influencers. Now we're not webmasters.
We're in trouble.
None of no talent here. But we go in the back end of our blog and we realize that the reason the website is down is because it had this massive influx of traffic to it. All these people had been visiting the site and we didn't even realize it. We weren't on there every day logging on and checking views and hits. We didn't know that. So to Cameron's point, nobody was really doing what we were doing. These, I get on Instagram now, which Instagram wasn't a thing when we started this. And there's all kinds of, Kentucky road trip accounts, and there's bloggers that are going out and they're seeing these things. Nobody was doing it. And I don't mean we're trailblazing. I just meant there was no one in this space who cared to do it. So we were doing it. Well, that meant that when you went to Google and you typed in what's with that castle on that road on your
That
way to
just caught
Lexington,
fire and burned down.
that the only thing that came up was our post. And so it was getting hundreds and then thousands of views. And we thought, wow, there's some interest here. And so that just sparked us to keep traveling and keep going, and figured we were making, even if it wasn't our intended impact, we were making an impact.
An impact. And certainly neither of us set out to do this. Well, neither of us set out to do this, period, but certainly not to write a book. And it, was a sort of a random email from a book publisher. And this is, ironic because I do myself actually work in book publishing now. Didn't occur to me, not ever, not once. So when a publisher reached out to us and said, hey, I think there's something here. And like, how about we string some of this together in a book and do a few extras? And we were like, actually, yeah. What do you think? I guess we could do that.
It seemed easy at the time.
At the time.
We were like, we've already traveled maybe 20 road trips or so. We'll just copy and paste. We'll just take all of our blogs and we'll put them into a Word doc and book. Voila, done. And then the publisher was like, no, that's not how this works. You have to write something in order to have a book. You actually have to write real chapters and real entries. And so we had to sit back down and we outlined 25 road trips. So what you will see in My Old Kentucky Road Trip are 25 main road trips. We start all the way west and work our way east, which I will tell you all is not how we traveled it. And
No.
I always tell people that because I don't want people thinking that in order to take a road trip or to tackle this book, you have to do it in a weekend or a week, or you have to take time off work and say, I'm going on this road trip. I would love it if you did that. I would love to do that.
That would be amazing. I would love to take a
But
couple
that's
weeks.
not how we were traveling. We
And
were
that's
working.
not how life is.
No, we were working, we were in grad school, we had all these things to do. We couldn't just take a road trip and travel. So we were finding little clusters of things to do on weekends or holidays or, spring breaks. And so the book is organized from west to east, but we took these road trips just sporadically and sometimes more than once. I always tell people I've been to Mammoth Cave so many times, I've lost count.
Yeah.
So we just took these in little clusters, and feel free to kind of chart your course as you travel Kentucky in the way that makes sense to you.
And this is the beauty, I think, of traveling and exploring your home state is you do have a lot more of that flexibility. You don't have to block out the full week, the full 2 weeks, the extra weekend of travel, and then the weekend to recover and get back to work. It's so much easier and so much nicer. I will also say our other grand benefit in doing this book was that Blair married a professional photographer.
Just for this book, actually.
This
his
is
own purpose.
this is why she said yes. So all of the gorgeous photos in that book and in all of our books were taken by Blair's husband Elliot, which has honestly been part of the magic.
It helps us out a lot because our point and shoot Canon photos were not going to work
Not doing the
in
job.
this situation. It was not going to be a winner. But we set out to do these road trips, and we found we had to go back to a lot of places because while we thought we were giving folks tips and tricks, we weren't painting a full picture. So a lot of these places in my old Kentucky road trip, we traveled many, many times. And so not only do you get 25 road trips, but you'll get these little side anecdote stories throughout the book. They're little off the road, kind of pun intended,
Gems.
to tell you about, because as we would travel back to these places, we would find new things about them and we would want to write them down and we would want to include them. And every time we go back to one of these destinations, I feel like we have another one, and we always say we're going to do like a reprint and do a bonus edition, or what we don't. Instead we decided to write some more books about it. So we found a way to do it. But
Yes, and I would say too that I'm probably the bigger history nerd of the two of us. Thank
probably
you,
is a
KHS.
stretch. She is the
Definitely.
bigger history nerd.
You
We
know-
don't need a probably qualifier.
So we very much, continue to collect these stories. I find myself constantly falling down rabbit holes and clicking this source and that source and reading that. We're standing here right now at the Kentucky Historical Society in Frankfurt, who have a fabulous phone app. I believe it's the Explore Kentucky phone app, and it works like Google Maps. And so you can just see exactly which historical markers are around you at any given moment, wherever you are. I know, I see your jaw drop. It's the best. It's the greatest.
And we've used it many times. We could not for the life of us find the historical marker where the Happy Birthday Sisters, who wrote the Happy Birthday song in Louisville, are. And it turns out we couldn't find it because it's in this like median under an overpass that like one of us has to wear a safety jacket and block traffic and the other has to run out to
In
it.
the middle of downtown
It's
Louisville.
fun,
It's
but
crazy.
we're able to find it because they have this amazing app. So there's so many resources we have utilized because of that.
They have been so useful. So all of these stories sort of kept collecting, and one book sort of turned into, well, there's so much more that we still want to go and explore and do and see. So from my old Kentucky road trip, we actually spawned off an additional 3 books that became mini guides. So we've also done, we collected food and food festivals, which that's a great one. If you're hungry on the hottest day of the year, you can go have some burgoo in Anderson County. We did.
Not what you want in the hottest day of the year. We always laugh about food festival dates because it's like you go to these food festivals, it is 95 degrees outside, and they're like, would you like a bowl of burgoo? And you're like, not even a little
Not
bit.
at all.
Like, I don't even want it to get near that pot that has steam coming off
I
of
can't
it.
believe they're standing over
I
it.
just, we're going to rework the food festival calendar one day. When they let us, I don't know who they is going to be, but we're working on it.
Working on it. We're
going
working
to
on
have
it.
burgoo festival in the winter time.
Of course, as any good Kentuckian, we also did a bourbon mini guide, which probably could be about triple the size that it is now and continue to
that
grow
many.
every year.
It's definitely pushing on not being many.
For sure. And also presidents and Civil War battles, which I think Kentucky is often sort of forgotten in the conversation around the history of the Civil War. So those were our 3 mini guides. And most recently, we have had our 5th book come out, which is Kentucky Y'all, which I know is sitting in the gift shop right now. And this was really our true off the road book. We still love traveling. We still travel together constantly. We actually just repeated our Mammoth Cave road trip recently this fall together, which was so much fun. But Kentucky Y'all has become the place where we've put these stories, these extra tidbits on history, why we wear hats to the Derby, why it's so important to us that we have biscuits at Christmas, or gosh, Blair, help me out. Like, who are the great writers, thinkers, inventors that have made our state something to be proud of? And so it became a great place for us to collect all of these stories, these people we talked to, and these things that we learned.
Yeah. So important thing to keep in mind as you all start to read my old Kentucky road trip, which I always, every time I read a book club or I join a book club and I do a book, I always wish I had someone telling me, don't be intimidated by this book. Don't think that you're getting ready to jump. If you're a fiction person, you love stories, and you're like, I don't know how I feel about reading like a nonfiction travel history book. The whole point of why the blog worked, the whole point of why they called that day and said, I think you all have something here. And the whole reason we have, 2, 3, 4, 5 books is because we wanted to almost trick people into learning Kentucky history. We wanted you to be in our backseat of our car with us as we drive across the state, as we tell our silly anecdote things about what we learn in our travels. We tell you where we messed up. We tell you where it worked well. We're not going to bombard you with history. And none of these books are going to say, here's the entire history of the state as we know it. Instead, it's going to say, here's where you go to experience it for yourself. We're going to give you just enough that you might be interested, but we want you to go to there. That's the whole point. The
Keep
whole
going.
point is exploring your own state. What would be the point of us giving you all the answers in the book? You have to get on the road and you have to do it for yourself.
And truthfully, 5 books in, we have barely hit the surface.
Oh my gosh, we were at an
There is
event
so much more.
on Tuesday night, and every question we got was like, have you been here? And I was like, no.
Nope.
Have you heard of this place? Well, no. Have you been to this thing? Oh, huh. I mean, everywhere we go, someone has an idea or a place or a thing we haven't seen or done yet. And it seems impossible as considering we've been doing this for over 15 years now of constant travel, but there is always another place to see. And there's new things that pop up all the time.
And that's what's always been so lovely about doing these book events, meeting new people. That's always been one of our favorite parts of doing events around any of the books is we do hear about all of these things that we have to add to the list, add to the notes, go down the rabbit hole, keep going, keep exploring. And I think for us, it's one more reason to love Kentucky.
It's been a lot of fun. We are happy to take questions. Either, I don't know if there's a way to take them online.
Are we doing it
or
now?
take 'em
Doing it later?
however you want to do them. Well, we'd like to, because we like to tell, share some of our favorite trips, but we also want to make sure you guys aren't bored with us talking up here. So we can tell you some of our favorite experiences on the road in the book, some of our off the wall things that didn't maybe make it in. But if we have questions, we're happy to answer those.
We'll rely on Mindy to yell at us from the chat.
No, I
We can
don't want to
restate.
bore you before we get too far.
Yes, I think you probably have to push the button. Yes, push the button, I think, right at the bottom of the, there you go.
Why do we wear hats at the Derby?
Why do we wear hats
Well,
at the
you have to
Derby?
go get the book and you have to learn about it. No, one of the very cool things about the Kentucky Derby that we get into in Kentucky Y'all, we do talk about the Derby a little bit in my Kentucky road trip, but in Kentucky Y'all is the history of it and the traditions of it there's all a root there. And at the heart of the hat question is kind of, when Lewis Meriwether Clark Jr., it's a long name to
Yep.
remember, founded the very first Derby at Churchill Downs on some land that his uncles had given him. He had been to England and he had seen horse racing done the way that England does horse racing, which is this very classy affair. You wear fancy dress and fancy hats and all the things. And when he came to America, gambling on anything, including horses, was still seen as kind of seedy.
Gross,
And back
dirty,
alley, and not
bad.
very classy. So he wanted to make it a little bit more highbrow. And so he got a bunch of his wealthy friends together and they literally drove around town door to door and said, hey, you all come out to my Derby. This is going to be this horse race. This is what it's going to be. Wear your Sunday best. And so everyone did. And the first attendees of that very first Derby, all dressed to the nines. And then, of course, the hat has evolved over time with fashion trends. It started as a necessity. It's on a hot day, a sunny day in May, or often a rainy day in May. And so, having that protection, then of course, when Princess Diana married Charles and everyone wore fascinators and we saw it on television for the first time, now there was a change in that. So
I will say my other favorite tidbit about hats is they became super important when the advent of television came, because also then women wanted to be able to be picked out of a crowd. So that became another reason why you would wear your big hat. My other interjection too about the Derby is, despite its British origins, when Meriwether Clark brought racing over to the U.S., he made sure that the horses ran the opposite direction in the U.S. because we didn't want to be too British.
so they run this way,
Not
this way.
this
in
way.
England.
So yeah, hats. Wear a big hat and they'll find you on TV. Fabulous.
They're moving.
we got
They're
one
on
more.
the move.
Did you all happen to meet the mayor of Rabbit Hash when you went?
We did.
did.
So that is in, I believe, in Kentucky road trip.
Lucy Liu.
Lucy Liu. Now I believe it's a different mayor now. It's been several years since we've been for this book. So it was Lucy Liu when we were there. And actually the photo in the book of Rabbit Hash General Store is the original Rabbit Hash General Store that a few years after we traveled totally burned to the ground, but they have rebuilt it. So
We were worried the book would be terribly
I
out of
know we
date.
were like, oh my gosh, this dates the book, but now they've rebuilt it. So rest assured. But we did meet the mayor. Have you met a Rabbit Hash mayor? Oh.
So in the room, her parents have met the mayor of Rabbit Hash.
So just spoiler alert, I don't think this will ruin anything in the book, but the reason this is a point of novelty is because the mayor of Rabbit Hash is a dog.
Yes.
And it is elected each year.
Every year, and
Every year?
it's $1 to vote, and you can vote as often as you like.
So when we say that you travel to Rabbit Hash and pet the mayor, it's okay.
It's okay.
That's
It's okay. It's allowed.
That's not as upsetting as that might
I do
sound.
believe, I also believe at some point in the last like 5 to 10 years, they had a tie one year. And so there was a double dog mayor,
Double dog
mayor.
mayor.
We know that Kentucky is full of interesting places, but it's also full of interesting people. Who is the most interesting person you've met?
Well, that's a good one. Well, Blair's daughter met one of the old distillers. I'm going to blank now on from the Jimmy Russell. Yeah.
Yeah, we if you've been to
She was
Wild
like 2 at
Turkey.
the time.
yeah, well, if you've been to Wild Turkey in Lawrenceburg, a lot of times when you're in the gift shop, and this is pre-COVID. I don't remember if this is pre-COVID. My years have run together, but a lot of times if you go to the gift shop, especially during the weekdays at Wild Turkey, if you walk in the front door, there's an older gentleman who sits on a stool right inside the front door of the gift shop. And he's just very unassuming looking. He just sits there and he'll talk casually to people who are in and about the store. And so we were there for a tour, I think that for the second book, The State of Bourbon. And he was sitting there and I didn't really recognize who it was. And so we were shopping around and my daughter, who was about 2 at the time, was running around and climbed up on this older gentleman's lap. And of course I run over to panic of like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, give me that back. She's mine. And it was the master distiller at Wild Turkey, Jimmy Russell, who of course his line is legendary in the bourbon world. So that was a lot of fun. But I think it's, a lot of the people that we've met on the road have not been famous people. A lot of the people we've met on the road are regular old Kentuckians. Like you and me.
Yeah, I was going to shoot out one of my favorites, and certainly Leroy from Leroy's Old General Store in Cave City was
In Cave
fabulous.
City,
He was
yes.
wonderful. One of my personal favorites was we did the boat ride down the Kentucky River at Shaker Village of Pleasant Hill, and the boat captain, and I'm not going to remember his name, but he had the best stories, just about history on the river, working at Shaker Village, animals that would pop up and see. He was wonderful. I would say also I've been very lucky, and makes me very proud to be a Kentucky woman. Have met Governor Martha Layton Collins. So I would say she was also one of the most interesting and fascinating folks that we've. I did not necessarily meet her for the book, but it was a pretty special thing.
I do think, I don't think I've ever been on a bad tour in Kentucky, and
No.
that covers everything. That covers the historical sites, the cave tours, the bourbon tours. I don't know that I've ever had a bad tour guide. I assume every one of them's lying to me to some extent.
Yeah.
And you'll know why, because if you ever go on one of these tours, especially bourbon distilleries, they're the oldest, the first, the best, the longest operating. And then you go down the street 5 miles and they're the oldest and the first and the best and longest operating, and they can't all be. So I assume every tour guide's telling me like a little bit of a story, but that makes it fun. And as many times as I've been to Mammoth Cave, never had the same guide. They tell different stories every time. I think they switch it up just to keep it interesting because they probably do so many a day. But I don't know that I've ever been on a bad tour.
No. We met a great park ranger once at the Big South Fork Scenic Railroad. He found us a bald eagle. It was incredible.
We didn't get to take it home just
No.
to see. You made it sound like he caught us one and we took it. Now we have a bald eagle.
Yeah, he caught it right in his hands.
We were like, we are not really on a Kentucky road trip unless we take home a bald eagle. No, that was not at all. All right.
Fab.
Well, some of the things I will tell you, I don't know. The problem with when we start talking about my old Kentucky road trip is we've taken so many road trips. I always have to say, Cameron, was that one in this book? We have to think about it. But one of our favorite, something to know about Cameron in particular.
I know where she's going.
He loves a cemetery.
Love a cemetery.
And if one day we have a book called My Old Kentucky Cemeteries, nobody be that shocked. I will have written it under duress. I will be writing it kicking and screaming, but Cameron loves a cemetery in the state of Kentucky. And The reason she does is because many are so beautiful and there's so many amazing Kentuckians buried in these places, and she likes the hunt of finding
You got to find the oldest
headstone.
birthday, the oldest stone. Yeah.
But for every beautiful cemetery in the state, there is one on top of a hill with no trees.
No trees.
And beating sun surrounded by a chain link fence. And that is always a cemetery that Cameron's like, that's the one we're going to. That's the one where we're going to go find that marker.
Phil Everly from the Everly Brothers. That was
So Cameron decides she wants to chase down one of the Everly Brothers headstones on one of these road trips.
the other thing you got to know about us is when we're in the car, if I see one of the brown signs on the side of the interstate that says this
we're
historical
stopping.
site this way, we're taking the exit.
We're stopping. It makes road trips long, and probably the reason we can't take a full one, in a week, because it's a lot of stopping.
So when you drive past Central City and you see the sign saying Everly Brothers Monument Museum, you got to go.
So we take the exit at Central City. If any of you all have been to the Everly Brothers Museum in Central City, please don't ruin our story. So we stop, and the first thing she wants to do is find the headstone. So go to the cemetery on Main Street, climb the hill, you're walking around. There is no monument. It's just a
They're
regular
all flat to the
they're all,
ground.
like level. There's not even like a fancy headstone. We're walking row, looking for this. It's beating sun. I think we did finally find the
I
headstone.
think we did.
I'm hope for the purposes of the story, like the bourbon distillery tour, I will tell you we found it. It's up to you whether or not you believe us or not. So we decide we want to go to the museum. We're, didn't get what Cameron wanted off of this headstone. So we're going to go to the museum. So we start driving around town. Now, for those of you who are either from or have been to Central City, it's not a large town. Okay. It's small, couple blocks of downtown, and of course, lots of farmland around. So we're driving the blocks in zigzags. We're looking for signs. We're trying to, pull up on GPS. I see no map or nothing on the map of a museum. So Cameron and I are like, at one point, I think I have to just tell her, we got to stop this. Like, we got to get home. We got to go to the next place. So we stop at McDonald's for a quick pit stop before we get back on the road. And we go inside the McDonald's, and there in the Central City McDonald's is a huge glass case.
Display case. Memorabilia,
Full of Everly Brothers memorabilia.
records, shoes.
The museum is in the McDonald's. And so I'm like, there's no way that's true, right? This is just like some sort of traveling cool thing. No. According to the manager, who was maybe 17 at the counter, this is in fact the Everly Brothers Museum. And for everyone who should travel to the Central City, you can get your large Coca-Cola Classic, your chicken nuggets, and your Everly
And
Brothers
your museum
all in
memorabilia.
one go. So those are one of those things that you have to, sometimes you have to look a little bit harder. turn over
Sometimes the
last
road
box.
delivers. Sometimes the road brings you exactly what you need.
It's funny now. I don't remember laughing at the moment.
Not at the moment.
I don't
No.
think I don't think
We
I
were
thought this very
sweaty.
funny
We were
at the time.
tired. I dragged Blair to another cemetery.
Do you have a favorite off the road random occurrence?
Gosh, off the road random occurrence.
I'm trying to think of one that we went to the Abraham Lincoln State Historic Site 20 minutes before it closed.
Yep.
And in case you were wondering, there are 56 stairs up to the memorial to see the cabin inside.
And when you only have 20 minutes, 56 big, wide, broad stairs up a hill is rough.
It was not as much fun as it could have been.
Not
56
excellent.
steps though, because that was how old the president was when he was killed. So there is symbolism there. We appreciate that. We did get to watch them bring the flag down, the flagpole, and fold it. It was one park ranger by himself, and he had a system of folding the flag before unhooking it from the flagpole so he could do the full ceremony of the folding. He unhooked the bottom and then had it so it was effectively another person standing there. And he went through the entire ceremony of floating the flag as if nobody was there. We were just happened to be walking by.
Yeah.
But to think that he did that every night, even with no visitors, was very special.
I think for me, and now when I look back, and now as an adult, a real adult, I guess, ostensibly.
Up for interpretation.
I think back about all the ways as a kid that I came to love Kentucky. And for me, it was as a Girl Scout. And I used to go to sleepaway camp in Morgan County at Camp Judy Lane, if anybody else out there was a Girl Scout and went to Girl Scout camp. And that for me, I think really solidified, outside of growing up in Lexington and Keeneland and all that, what it meant to sort of be in Kentucky, be in the places where Daniel Boone came through the wilderness road and blazed a trail. And that has stuck around for me also, as I feel like I occasionally need the trees of Eastern Kentucky to feel like I'm really home. This is just sort of a side little tidbit about me. To disappointment, I actually do live in Texas now. And every time that I come back, I'm forcing Blair and other friends to run off into the woods with me for a weekend because
It
we
makes us show her
we
the
have to go
trees.
see the trees. Because I miss them terribly. West of the Mississippi River, they're not as tall, they're not as lush, they're not the same. It's the worst. But please know that in Texas, I remind them constantly that everything they care about came from either Kentucky or Tennessee first. They like to pretend that they have Davy Crockett and Sam Bowie, but they do not. They are
So wonder if she has any
ours.
friends in Texas really at this rate. But I will say one wonderful thing from Camp Judy Lane also is that Cameron learned to start a fire.
Yeah.
So now when we road trip, we can always count on Cameron to start our fires. We would take that away.
We
from
can make
Cam.
it happen. I can also recognize a copperhead. It's useful. Useful.
So take Cameron on your road trip with you. I think we will just leave you with this. And again, we're happy to take any questions. But so when we were writing the 5th book, Kentucky Y'all, we wrote that with University Press of Kentucky, and it was a long process. It was as we said, it was our first off the road journey. And so writing this book was not easy. I don't want to tell people. I always feel bad when I get up on like author panels and things, and they're talking about authors are talking about years of trying to get their book published. And we're like, yeah, this lady called us and was like, you want to make a book?
No big deal.
They don't love it when you tell that story. But that's not to say it wasn't very hard. We had to sit down and say, how does one write a book? How do you tell a story when you hear us talk? This is just how we carry on a conversation. We finish each other's sentences. We kind of carry on with jokes, but we had to sit down and write a narrative in a book, and we had to make it sound like a cohesive message and a cohesive voice, and there are 2 of us doing it. So it wasn't without its challenges, but we always had the road to fall back on. We knew that at the end of the day, if we couldn't figure out how to say it, we just get back in the car and we go back there, and surely there would be something in that space that would inspire us, and we could help write that journey so that someone else could inspire it. When we were writing Kentucky Y'all, we didn't have that to fall back on. We could just jump in the car and go places, but we weren't writing about road trips the way that this book is written. And so we struggled. We went through, it'd also been several years since we'd written.
Yeah.
And when it was going through peer review, we had a peer reviewer trying to understand the concept of what we were trying to do. And they said, it kind of reads as if they're trying to write like this love letter to Kentucky. We're not really sure. And I highlighted it and I texted to Cameron and I said, I think it's right though.
This
I
is what
think
we're doing.
they might have meant it as an insult, as maybe we weren't writing the academic
Something
book
serious.
that they thought we were writing. But I think what started with my old Kentucky road trip, perhaps maybe not entirely on purpose, was Cameron and I have been trying to write this love letter of, we just want you to get out and look at what's here. Be proud of what's here. A lot of folks, I do a lot of traveling around talking to people and a lot of kids lately. And I will ask them, who's from Kentucky, who's proud to be from Kentucky? And there's so many of them who aren't. And we're trying to fix that mentality. We're trying to go out and talk to as many people as possible and say, if you're not, have you tried? Have you gone out and looked and explored and traveled? Have you given it a shot? Because I think if you've been to a couple places and you've met a couple people, you actually might love it more than you think. So I'm pretty sure that peer reviewer meant it as an insult. But what started with my old Kentucky road trip and now has evolved 5 books later really is our version of a love letter to Kentucky. And that's what we hope that you all get to do on these road trips, whether you travel with them or just read along. It's really what we hope.
It means a lot to us, so we hope it means a lot to you too. Amazing. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We will bring you all up for a panel.
Wonderful. Be thrilled.
So our next presenter. Oh, we got a question. Sorry.
We got it. We're back.
Okay. Thank you all for coming to Franklin County. And so being the FCS agent in Franklin County, growing up here and being where we are right now at the History Center
Yes.
in rich part of Frankfort, which used to be called the Crawl. I grew up directly behind here can see here, and you're standing between two of the oldest African-American churches in Frankfurt. What was your favorite spot here?
Oh, here in Franklin County. Do you want to, I mean, well, I love the state cemetery. Shocker. We're all shocked by this now.
I have a lot of people ask me if Daniel Boone's really buried there, and it makes me laugh because I'm always like, yep. And I'm not telling any different. It's in my Kentuckian contract to just tell you he's buried there and not
Yeah.
ask any questions. No, when we wrote the Civil War book, we did a lot of stuff up here at Fort Hill and over at the cemetery right at the intersection of Main Street and I call it Versailles Road because I'm from Lexington, and so that's what we call it. But it's 60. Okay,
Green
right
Hill.
with the Green Hill Cemetery. We did a lot of stuff there, which I think is really neat. That was a book that was an example of when we liked jumping into some of the histories that are. I pass that cemetery dozens of times a week, and I didn't know it was. I mean, I knew it was there, but since I'm not in love with cemeteries like this one, I didn't really know what it was, and so that's really interesting. So I think that and Fort Hill were some of our more we didn't know it discoveries. But the history of the Mayo Underwood School and a lot of things like that were really interesting about Franklin County that we learned.
Yeah.
There is a Frankfurt road trip in my old Kentucky
There
road trip.
absolutely is.
There's a
Of
whole
course there
chapter on
is.
Frankfurt.
Of course there is.
You can send us your critiques and your reviews at the end.
Please.
Hold on, oh,
Do it. Let's do it. We got two. Let's go.
okay. So my question is, how do you inspire people to travel and to see the state? I mean, I know they can read your book and be inspired, but if, you just think, I don't have the time this weekend, or
Yeah.
I don't have the money, or I don't have the drive, how can you help people get that spark to say, do something?
Well, I mean, my hope is that I think when you can start small, there are so many things, no matter what county you're in, Franklin County, like Blair living here and realizing that Green Hill exists and it's right around the corner. And that's free to go and visit. State parks, I think, are also fabulous places to go for free and to go and see things. I think for us, when we talk to folks, it is about starting small. And even in Lexington, it was downloading the free walking tour from the Bluegrass Trust and just wandering around a couple of blocks downtown for an afternoon. So there are ways that I think when you have folks that you can encourage, if it's just an afternoon, maybe it's a virtual trip. Maybe it's just Googling something, a sign that you saw somewhere and passed and always wondered what that was. Or I'm constantly, oh my God, I see like a big weird house off in the distance. And I'm like, what is that? And then I go like grab the address off Google Maps and try to figure out what the heck it actually is. And I think any small ways that people can get involved, starting with their neighborhood, with their community. And I think now, not to get political or anything, I
Before she
think
gets political. She's like, not to do this.
no. I think because we got so online really quickly, and I hope this is true for other people because I feel like it's true for me. There's almost been a backswing where everybody got super online, and now it's like, I really miss neighbors, community, events that are happening. So like often it's, hey, this thing is happening in this square downtown on a Saturday afternoon. And then maybe I spot the historical marker that I have to go walk up and read and go see what that says. Or, you finally do talk to somebody while you're waiting in line at the food truck or whatever. And I think for me, those are the small ways that always get me curious. And so anything you can do to help inculcate that idea of curiosity for folks, and that even if you're not 12 years old anymore, it's still worth learning something new. And I think that's a really beautiful thing.
And I will just add, I think there is a misconception that you have to spend money and go far to travel. And that's why I say, don't take this road trip like we wrote the book, because that's not actually how we road tripped. We did it in little bitty pieces. And when we did it, we also had absolutely no money. I mean, we
had just graduated college.
Had no money.
No money.
That's why we slept in a wigwam. Okay. Like these are not 5-star hotels. These are not big spa experiences. The state parks are extremely affordable to sleep in overnight at the lodges. There were a lot of times
with good food too.
What cost us was splitting a tank of gas. That was pretty much the cost. I mean, we discovered the Everly Brothers Museum because we were stopping at McDonald's because that's what we could afford. A lot of places have these little small mom and pop shops, but I think there's a misconception that you must go far and you must spend money to travel. And we did it for very, very cheap for a very long time.
Sure. Yes.
In 2020, we did a project here at the Frankfurt Cemetery to celebrate the passage of the 19th Amendment in which women got the right to vote.
Yes.
And there are 25 certified suffragists that are buried in the cemetery.
Oh, that's a
And we
fabulous
have
fact.
Gold medallion, bronze medallions by each of those graves. And there is a brochure by the office when you go in that has the map that shows where they are.
Perfect.
It's really cool. We've done tours of it before COVID.
I will be going to pick one of those
Yeah,
up.
that's really neat. Although I did not need you to give her another reason to go to the cemetery, but I do. I love that. But yeah, there's another one.
Oh, yeah. And actually, I will say, so for the new book, Kentucky, y'all, in addition to it not being a road trip, it's our first book where we've not had photos. We actually had a really wonderful illustrator named Jessica Rusher who did all of the illustrations for us, both in the chapters and the cover. And I will say, when Blair introduced me to her, because she had worked with Blair on a previous project, the sample that she showed me was this beautiful magazine spread that she had hand illustrated of the suffragists. Yeah. Which was fabulous. Yeah, that is definitely an era of history that I will go deep down the rabbit hole for. I tend to always shout out Mary McDowell Breckinridge as well as one of my favorite women in Kentucky history. And I really lament that the Kentucky Women's Hall of Fame in the Capitol has sort of gone by the wayside post Elder Bashir. I would love to see that kick back in.
It's our next campaign.
Next campaign, yes.
That's one of my special interests is Kentucky women. So it's back for the past 2 years. The induction for this year was Monday. They
Fabulous.
added 4 new
Great.
women to the Kentucky Women Remembered Hall of Fame.
Gorgeous. This is what happens when you move to Texas and you lose the news like this. That is great news. I can't
Made
wait.
her day. Now she has a new cemetery to
Yep.
visit, and now she knows it's back. So Cameron can go.
I'm
home
happy.
Thank you. We appreciate you all so much. And our next speaker is Dr. Jim Seaver, who is the director of the Historical Marker Program. See how it all comes full circle. It was working in my brain, and now it's working because you all talked about the historical markers, and it is perfect. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jim Seaver.
Thank you. I'm grateful to everybody for tuning in today, whether you're here in person or joining us online. I was going to ask our previous guests, have you ever been to marker 1831 in Bowling Green, the home and office of Duncan Hines? Yes? Because you all are like modern day Duncan Hines. And for the people who are kind of thinking, what's he getting at here? We all recognize Duncan Hines because of the box cake mixes, but he started off kind of as an amateur travel writer. And in the 1930s, he compiled a list of his favorite places to eat and shared it with friends and family. He was a traveling salesman. He went across multiple states, and everybody kept badgering him for this travel guide that he had written for his friends and family. So he started publishing it and had a little publishing empire, and then somehow falls into box cake mixes and other products. So I can see box cake mixes on your all's horizon, competing for shelf space with Betty Crocker. I think Dolly Parton now has a box cake mix. So yes, you're going to be right there. So yeah, my name is Jim Seaver. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Historical Marker Program. You can see me here on my second day on the job at Maker's Mark Distillery in Marion County. And I always say, I'm so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed there, and pretty excited to be at a distillery. So anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about the state marker program. I think most people are used to seeing these things on the side of the highway. It's a really great thing to hit up if you're traveling around the state using one of the travel guides that you all have put together. And the whole point is to create these on-the-ground educational encounters with Kentucky history where it happened. So yeah, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about that. Let's see if I can get the clicker to work. Michael, do I point it at you or at the screen? Wherever I want to point it. There we go. So who is this nerd and why is he here? I grew up in Lexington, and driving around as a kid in the 80s and the 90s, we actually had in our car a guidebook to all the state markers. And, you drive past them going 50, 60, 70, 80 miles per hour sometimes. you don't really get to read them at that speed. So the whole point was that we could look up what a marker was that we had just gone past. So even before I got into the job that I'm doing now here at the Kentucky Historical Society, I was very much a marker enthusiast. So my official title is Community Engagement Coordinator, but the thing that takes up the bulk of my time is working on these things right here. So I always like to show something that we put out on social media a couple of years ago. The state historical markers are arguably the most recognizable brand that the Kentucky Historical Society manages. And even people who have never come to visit us here in Frankfort are used to seeing these things out and about. So our social media team a few years ago put out on social media this question: Twitter historians, let's see how creative you can get. What would your historical marker read? And it was fascinating for me to see the answers that we got from all over the place. There it goes. Here's just a limited selection that we got in the hours after that. So somebody said the famous writer Hunter S. Thompson. I can't even begin to imagine what that marker would say. It would be wild. Or what the dedication event would be like for it. Some folks talked about the Marquis de Lafayette's famous trip through Kentucky in 1825. Owen County's Rural Electric Cooperative wrote up their own marker. We had a teacher put his name through an AI program to see what came up. Georgetown, Kentucky, their tourism said that they are the true birthplace of bourbon. And I'm not going to wade into that fray. That's a little contentious right there. There are plenty of people who disagree. Other people did some humorous ones. My favorite came from Kentucky's Secretary of State, Michael Adams, who wrote his own and said that he could play the drum parts of nearly 80% of Rush songs, and that he imported the Boris Johnson haircut to the USA from the United Kingdom. I ran into him at a civic education event last fall, and he doesn't know me. I just walked up and I said, "Is it true that you know how to play 80% of the drum parts from Rush?" And he goes, "No, that's not true at all." And there's this awkward moment, and he goes, "I'm up to 95%. So yeah, people really love these historical markers, and it's kind of fun to see how they use them to interpret Kentucky history, however you want to define that. What I love about these markers is that they are ambassadors for the state of Kentucky. You encounter them in all 120 counties. This one sits in front of the Sanders Cafe and Museum in Corbin in southeastern Kentucky. And what I love about this spot is you can go inside, and it is a fully functioning KFC in addition to a high quality museum that has people visit from all over the US and internationally. You can eat fried chicken while you tour the museum, and it doesn't get much better than that. And right in front of it, we have a state historical marker. So we are in our 76th year of the state marker program. At least in terms of the state government running it. And I always say that we can think about the program in terms of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the good is that we are still putting up new markers on the landscape today. Both of these photos came from some of the first dedication events that I ever worked in this role. Up on the left, you see a marker dedication for Lance Corporal Joe Calvin Paul, who was killed in action in Vietnam. He was a Medal of Honor recipient. And it was a very poignant event. The people who live there in Williamsburg, Kentucky, still remember him fondly. This marker is now on the courthouse lawn. And it was both it was a bittersweet event. There was still a lot of emotion about his loss, but it was a lovely event and a nice commemoration of him and his sacrifice. Here on the lower right, you see a marker that went up a little closer to Frankfort, over in Midway at the Midway Freedman School. And yeah, the whole point of these things is to help people acknowledge history in their own areas and to get to celebrate that as well. So I love dedication events. It's my favorite part of the job. It's almost like a wedding day for these marker projects that we've been working on. So that's the good. And the bad. You can't have a roadside marker program without people occasionally hitting them with cars. So that's what took out this one in Paducah that you see on the upper left. On the upper right, the oldest markers that we manage are many decades old, and sometimes the posts just give up the ghost and snap in half. So that one actually happened not far from where I live in Frankfurt. And then I always tell people that historians sometimes make mistakes too. We do fact check these things rigorously because when you're putting your words in metal on the landscape, you want to get the story right. Unfortunately, there was a marker in Louisville where somebody, not me, got a date wrong for York, who was somebody on the Lewis and Clark expedition. So a colleague and I went out about a year and a half ago and painstakingly chiseled off the incorrect number for the year he was born. He was born in 1772, not 1722. If he had been born in 1722, he would have been in his 80s by the time he crossed the continent with Lewis and Clark. And that would not be fair to do to somebody that age, any kind of road trip like that. So yeah, anyway, we updated it. We chiseled off the wrong number and riveted on a new one and painted it. So hopefully if you go and see it, you won't notice that typo had to get fixed. But it just shows how committed we are to getting the story right in putting these markers on the landscape. And then there's the ugly. This hardly ever happens, but there are a few memorable tales of markers either being stolen or there's one in Crittenden County on the upper left that has 4 bullet holes in it. So people are wild, but I always say that 99 times out of 100, if something happens to a historical marker, it's because somebody wasn't looking where they were going when they were driving, or the roads were slick, or they backed into it with a box truck. It happens. So I had mentioned that we're in the 76th year of the state government running the marker program, but our earliest markers actually date to 1935, 1936. There was a private organization called the Historical Markers Society based in Lexington that put up about 24 markers across the Bluegrass region, mostly around or in Lexington. So marker number 1 is at Ashland, the Henry Clay Estate. It is still there. It is looking great. But yeah, it was kind of a private initiative that petered out on the eve of World War II. World War II came and went, and in oh no, that's not good. Michael, can you get us back to the presentation? So here, I got it from here. Technology is great. So after World War II, in 1949, the Kentucky Department of Highways actually revived the marker program and started putting up markers all over the state, with the Kentucky Historical Society offering a little assistance from the sidelines. So this is a marker in my neighborhood in Frankfurt. It has a very different design. I always call this a first-generation marker. And this one dates to the 1950s, I believe. And then in 1962, the Department of Highways said, why are we in charge of this? So the roles kind of flipped. Today, the Kentucky Historical Society takes the lead on these projects, but I always say that the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, they are the unsung heroes of the marker program. They help us so much with the installation and maintenance of these markers. So I'm very grateful to them for that assistance. Now, what's interesting about our markers in the 60s is that most of them were clustered in central Kentucky. Upwards of 80% of them were in Lexington, Louisville, Frankfurt, surrounding areas. And there was a gentleman by the name of W.A. Wentworth who moved to Frankfurt, where his wife was from. He had been an advertising executive in New York City, and he got involved with the marker program, and he said, hey, this is a state government program. We should have markers in all 120 counties. And for the next decade, he worked tirelessly to ensure that that mandate was fulfilled, that markers did go up in every county in the state. So there was a marker boom during that era. Side note, I got an email a couple of weeks ago from a young girl who was writing on behalf of her grandfather. They were trying to figure out, why is there an orange splotch in the middle of the marker? Sometimes people will reach out and say, hey, the bronze marker is rusting. in the middle. You need to come out here and paint it. And I always explain, these are actually aluminum and they were painted to look that way. So this is a second generation marker in terms of its design. And from the 60s up through the 90s, the foundry that makes the markers would intentionally paint it to look that way. It's called a polychrome color scheme. And the whole point was from day one, it looks weathered. And I asked the president of the foundry that we work with and have worked with for decades, why did they do that? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, it was the 70s, man. It was wild. So this is our version of kind of that avocado green refrigerator or stove that your grandparents probably had in their kitchen if you're old enough to remember that. But anyway, W.A. Wentworth, considered the father of the highway marker program today. And then we are not resting on our laurels. We are still continuing to put up new markers across the state. I'm so glad you all mentioned that we do have a free phone app called Explore Kentucky History that you can download wherever you prefer to get your apps. We also have it on our website that you can access. And you will find longer entries for about 1,000 of the 2,400 markers that we manage today. We're trying to add a few more entries every year. We also have a database that should have just about every marker on it as well, unless it's one of the ones that just went up in the past couple of years. We're going to get that up there eventually. So people contact me all the time and they say, hey, I live in a really cool house. It was built in 1988, and I think it needs a state marker. Or my grandma's birthday is in 3 weeks. She's turning 97. We think it would be great if she just opened up the blinds on the morning of her birthday and there was a marker about her there. Both of those are real examples that I have dealt with. I'm not making them up. So I always let people know that there is a process to getting a state historical marker. First and foremost, it's a community-driven program, meaning my colleagues and I do not get to run around the state with a magic wand putting in markers that we want to see. Rather, people in various communities around Kentucky will bring us ideas, and I tell them to think of it as essentially a competitive grant process in the sense that if your topic is approved, the state government will pick up the tab to have it designed, manufactured, and installed. So we tend to put up about 10 to 15 new markers a year out of the many dozens of topic nominations we receive. There's a committee of historians based around the state that advises us and helps select those topics for us. But it tends to be a pretty lengthy, rigorous, and competitive process. And today, the standard for getting a state historical marker is that your topic, even if it's highly localized, it really needs to kind of rise to the level of statewide or national historical significance in some way. Maybe it's tapping into larger themes or events within state or national history. And then you also need to prove that your topic has widespread community support, that it's not kind of a niche project for your really cool house built in 1988 that you think is cool, and not to say that it's not, but probably not, this program would not be the best fit for that, as I say up there. Today, our historians here in-house, we write the language that goes on the markers. And then, as I said, the Kentucky legislature a few years ago built into its budget a very generous appropriation to help support this program. So we are always very grateful to them and to our friends at the Transportation Cabinet who assist us with this work. So our markers today and pretty much since the 1960s have been made by a foundry based in Marietta, Ohio named Seaver Studios. If you wonder how they got the name Seaver, I think the founder's name was Hawes and they just flipped it. And people are always curious how these things are made. So we have about a 2-minute clip of a video that Michael is going to click over to and play for you. And that will give you a sense of how this very small third generation company in Ohio makes most of the state historical markers for most of the states east of the Mississippi. So Michael, I'll hand it off to you.
So that made our virtual trail into a physical trail. The Seaver Studios has been really terrific to work with, and we're so grateful for their expertise.
Seawall Studios is America's premier cast aluminum historical marker manufacturer, located here in Marietta, Ohio. Seawall Studios was founded in 1927. It was really a man's dream to mark the byways and the highways of America with cast aluminum historical markers. Seawall is really the only known large manufacturer of historical markers in the nation. This is a niche business. We make nothing but historical markers. Seawall's process is really kind of locked in time. There's really four really core processes. First, we typeset the patterns where we individually lay out every letter and then we glue them in place just long enough to make an impression in the sand, which is our next process, which is the sand foundry. This process dates back all the way to the Egyptians. The sand comes from the Ohio River. The Ohio River has a perfect silt and clay mixture for the casting process. We make two molds, put them together, and then in the void, we transfer the molten aluminum. After the casting is made, we bring it into our finishing department where we work down any of the imperfections or the pouring gates, and we try to clean it up from a metal standpoint to get it ready for the painting process. After that, we take it into our electrostatic powder coating process, puts a very hard, durable finish on it. Next, we then roll on a liquid enamel on all of the letters to get the contrasting view to where you can actually read them. And then we do the beautiful hand-painted seals. The votes for women's trail markers design comes from the William G. Pomeroy Foundation, and they're really kind of a neat combination of a white and the pink, and then some of the more delicate, more feminine looking colors. And we really think it's a nice grouping of colors to go on our marker, and they've been well received nationwide.
Another mission of the National Votes for Women.
Yeah, so you got to see how the markers are made. A former colleague of mine once said to me that it was almost insulting that Ohio sand is being used to make Kentucky markers. And I said, I have enough problems without having to drive Kentucky sand to the foundry in Ohio for that. But no, the folks at CUA do a great job. We're happy to work with them. I always say that every marker is a handmade work of art. It takes about 1 week from start to finish for them to make a marker. And they still typeset everything by hand. I have very strict formatting guidelines that I have to abide by. So when you reach out to me and say, Jim, I want a marker about the history of the horse in Kentucky, and it needs to cover everything up till yesterday, I always say, I have about 125 words that I can fit on there. We need to be brief. How do we condense it? And I get about 11 lines of text per side on a Kentucky State marker and 33 characters per line. So it is interesting trying to work under those editing guidelines. And I always say for that reason that every state historical marker is supposed to be the beginning of a conversation about Kentucky history rather than the end of it. So if it inspires you when you're driving around the state to grab your phone and Google, well, what's the deal with Duncan Hines and how did he end up getting a marker here in Bowling Green? The marker is doing its job. Let's see if I can get the clicker to work. Or Michael, you can just advance for me. There we go. So we've talked about some of the resources. Definitely, if you're curious to know more about the State Historical Marker Program, you can go to history.ky.gov, the Kentucky Historical Society webpage. There's some information there. We do have a pretty robust social media presence. I had mentioned some of the databases that are out there. There are a couple of things we do not maintain. It's not done in-house, but Historical Marker Database is an amazing resource. If you're familiar with IMDb for movies, it is that, but for historical markers all over the nation. On Facebook, there is somebody who maintains a page called Kentucky History on a Stick. There is another one that's more recent. There's a gentleman named Professor Bowtie who drives around the state. Have you seen him? He's wild, yeah. He has a very distinctive outfit that he likes to wear as he visits different markers around the state. He was here in Frankfurt a few weeks ago. And in fact, he was in my neighborhood, and I only found out after I saw the videos online. And I was like, he never writes, he never calls. And then if you have any questions that are a little more specific, you're welcome to reach out to me. My name is Jim Seaver, and I'm based here at the Historical Society. So I'm going to come up for air. What questions do you all have about state historical markers? It can be anything under the sun.
Oh, my mind is spinning right now with so many questions. So thank you for this talk. It was so interesting because we just whispered to each other. It gives you such an, or gives me such an appreciation of these signs that I didn't have or know before. So yeah, handmade. So my question is it illegal to deface a sign or shoot it or ruin it?
Yeah, if there is malicious intent, that is no bueno. You should not be harming the signs. So it can become a police issue if somebody does something intentionally, just as you would expect for any other, signage that disappears. So don't hurt the markers. It makes for a very bad day on my end.
And then there's one kind of a question comment online that I'll just repeat here. And it says, so many of the markers are placed where it's impossible to stop and read. And y'all had mentioned that too with the birthday sign in Louisville. Do you have any tips as to what people can do to access those hard to reach signs?
That is a great question. I will say for those of you who have noticed the ones that are almost impossible to reach, this being one of them. So the marker you see on the screen, Mystery Cemetery, I was out in Bullitt County last fall and I thought I must find it. I use this marker when I go and speak with high school and college groups to talk about what good history looks like today. And for those of you who can't read the text, Mystery Cemetery says, decades-old graveyard discovered near here. Graves with unmarked headstones believed to be those of itinerant railroad workers struck down by cholera epidemic during the construction of a railroad around 1854. Operative word. Or burial killed during one of the many skirmishes occurring in this area during the Civil War. And I will show this to a class and say, what's problematic about this marker? And most of the time they just sit there in silence. And then I say, sum up this marker with a single emoji. And I will watch an entire classroom do the shrugging emoji where they're like, and I'm like, is that the best history? Probably not. So if this marker were going to go up today, we'd want a little more information. Hopefully there might be something like an archaeological dig that precedes it so we have better information. But the other thing that bugs me about this marker is I nearly died trying to reach it. I had to play human Frogger running across a very busy rural highway, and the marker is not really visible from the road. You have to scramble up into the woods to get there. When we put up markers today, one of the criteria that we abide by is there a safe place to pull over so you can get out and inspect the marker? So that is one of the site logistics that we really want to adhere to today. Unfortunately, markers that went up in previous decades were not necessarily as committed to that principle, which is why it makes it more difficult to access them. If I always say prioritize safety above everything else. If there's a marker that you cannot easily access, go to hmdb.org or our database. You're probably going to be able to find a listing for it there. So good question.
The follow-up to that was, is there any thought being given to relocating the markers that have no place to stop and read?
It's kind of a case-by-case basis. Again, we have one of the oldest and largest marker programs in the nation. Texas and Virginia are the only two that I know of off the top of my head with more markers. So it would be impossible for me to go around relocating several hundred markers. If, heaven forbid, a marker does get hit by a car or knocked down by a tree, at that point, we usually do an evaluation as we're thinking about replacing it. Does the text look good? Is there anything that needs updating? Has new information entered the scene since that marker was put up in 1977, something like that? And we'll look at site logistics. We're never going to put a marker where people don't want it. I always say I'm not sticking the marker in the ground in the middle of the night and running away. We want to be good project partners at the local level as well. And we'll work with folks to figure out if there's a better location for that marker where it is more accessible. But I don't want to overburden the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. They already do heroic work for us as it is. And I'm pretty sure they'd wag their fingers at me if I said, hey, can you go and relocate the following, 374 markers to a slightly more accessible area? So yeah, again, case by case basis. Good question. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, have any markers ever been removed from the list of markers? And secondly, when did they start having a backside
What do you mean by backslide?
where there's information on both sides?
Oh, backside. Yeah. So markers that went up from the 60s up through the 90s, there was a possibility to have information on both sides, but it was a little cheaper if you put up a marker with the same text on both sides. And at an earlier point in the program, local communities had to raise the money to get a state marker. So it may have been on their end, a way to tell a story that was slightly more cost efficient. Today, our program standard is if we are putting up a new marker, it needs to have an interesting enough text or narrative that we can have different text on each side. So the whole point is for people to walk around and get as much information as possible. And then remind me again of the first question.
Have any markers ever needed to be removed from the list?
Off the top of my head, not really. And when I say that, I mean, everything is always logistics. I don't think I understood when I started taking this job that so much of my time is going to be spent on Google Street View, looking and making sure that it's safe for a marker to be installed somewhere. Or I just had a marker taken down temporarily in Louisville because the block downtown where it sits is going to be redeveloped, and they're putting up a high-rise office building. So with that, we're actually working with the construction company to have that one removed for a few years. And then once the building is finished, the marker goes back up. We did not want it to be hit by a backhoe. But no, in general, we are committed to maintaining the markers that we have, so we don't really run around the state pulling them out of the ground. So good question. Other questions? Okay, well, you can email me if anything comes to mind. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. Yes. All right. Next, we have Carla Carter, who is our extension agent for Family and Consumer Science here in Franklin County. And she's going to share just a little bit about things that are going on around town. Actually, I should say around the county, not around town.
Around
So
town.
everywhere. Right?
Everywhere. Thank you so much. Just want to thank Blair and Cameron for coming. Here, Franklin County is home, born and raised here. So super excited to have you all here and in my former front yard. A little few things that are going on at the extension office. First, let me congratulate Melissa Moore and Leah Ritter and Cynthia Hulker and Mary Ann Birch. They are winners of books. So if you participated in our trivia about the book or about things going on in Kentucky, you can pick those up at the extension office. We're located at 101 Lakeview Court here in Frankfort. And a few things that we have coming up. So we are fortunate enough to have 4 program areas here in Franklin County. We have Family and Consumer Science, we have horticulture, we have 4-H, and we have ag and natural resources. So tonight it is booked already, you all. There's a herb garden mastery class going on at the extension office at 5:30. That is with our nutrition education program assistant, Pamela Holbrook, and our hort agent, Adam Leonberger. There is a hook and cook going on next week on Monday out to the game farm. So we have collaborations all over. Tomorrow I will be hosting a spring evening on canvas. So if you like painting, something you think you're interested in, it's $25 per person, and it's at 5:30. I'm also hosting a Move Your Way with Bingo Size. So I teach bingo size at the Capital City Activity Center. It's a combination of bingo and exercise with education to go along with that. And we're going to have, we hope to have the biggest one with a multi-county focus between Franklin, Anderson, Woodford, Mercer, Lincoln, Garrett County, and Bull County on April 24th at 10 o'clock. So come out to the extension office. We would ask that you register by April 17th. And then I will also have a Diamond Dot art class on, there'll be 2 classes on April 10th, one from 11 to 1 and 6 p.m. to 1 p.m. because we know that we want to support arts education here in Franklin County. But most importantly, and I cannot leave my ag agent out because he would get me, the date has been set for Farm City Field Day. It is July 10th. And we're doing it different this year, you all. It will be held in the evening because we want everyone to come out that can. It'll be from 5 to 8 at the Kentucky State University Harold Benson Research Farm. And we are going to start with our meal first and tours after that. So everyone who wants to participate, including all of our volunteers, can help out. So that's what we got going on at the extension office. We are lucky to have extension offices in 120 counties, all here in the state of Kentucky. Make sure you use your extension office. We have lots of events going on, most of the time that are minimal cost and sometimes free for you, but your tax dollars pay for the things that go on there. So come out and visit us. We're at 101 Lakeview Court.
So I'm just going to have a few minutes. We're going to wrap up a little bit about what we are doing here. So we are going to take off across the state now that we've had this great introduction. We're going from west to east, just as the book is. And so we're going to start on April the 1st in Fulton County, which is as far west as you can go, and right on the Mississippi River. So we're excited to be there. And then we'll come up 65 a little bit, just past Mammoth Cave. We're going to Horse Cave because we do want to hit some of those hidden off the beaten path locations. And so we're going to go to Horse Cave because Hidden River Cave is in Horse Cave. And so we're going to go there. And then let's see, our third stop is Midway, and we'll be in Midway, Kentucky, and our Woodford County agent just walked out the room. And then we will go to Henry County for a tour, or we're going to learn about the Renaissance program there. And then we're going to wrap up in Lynch at a coal mine. And so we've kind of tried to give a little flavor of everything that's happening across the state. And then our FCS specialists are going to pitch in with some good tips about traveling with children, or traveling for mental health benefits, or what to eat while you're traveling, or travel safety. We've got all kinds of good tips that will be shared throughout the series. So you all are used to having us on Zoom. This is going to be a little bit different because our on-site locations aren't going to be on Zoom. They're going to be recorded, and then we'll post them on the YouTube channel after. We're not always sure about broadband capabilities in the remote places of Kentucky. And so we don't want to promise something that we cannot deliver. So we can promise that we'll record it, and we can promise that we'll post it, but we aren't always sure that we can have Zoom. So, Amy, before we wrap up. Okay, we're ready? We're ready to go? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for coming here today. Of course, if you'd like to tour the galleries, you can stop at the registration desk and pay your fee there. At 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock, there are guided tours, one down to the old state capitol, and then also one here in the building, I think. Is that right? The 3 o'clock's here in the building, right? So, we hope that you will take advantage of what's available. And if you are able to, then you will, of course, visit all that is here. Reach out to Amy or I with any questions that you have, and we are grateful for your time. So.